When Peter Bentley and John Watkins launched the McKell Institute in April 2012, they decided to name it after William McKell. He was a former Premier and Governor-General. But it wasn't because of his policy achievements necessarily, as substantial and lasting as they were. It was his model of campaigning and his model of governing that made the lasting impression on them. Bill McKell was the first Labor leader who really reached out beyond the traditional divides of unions and business and brought the city and the bush together, brought environmentalists together with industrialists. And I was reflecting on that in the lead up to this event in particular, because the best articulation of that strategy didn't unfortunately come from Bill McKell. It came from a young then state senator for Illinois in 2004 when he nominated John Kerry for the Democratic Party's presidential nomination. The then Senator Obama called out this sort of us and them mentality that had dominated politics for so long. He noted that it was really the political class that had divided the nation into red and blue states, and that distinction was an entirely false one. It was a philosophy that would carry him all the way to the White House in just 4 short years. But truth be told, it only carried him most of the way there. The rest of the journey had to be fought tooth and nail by a team of incredibly canny campaigners. This team was, of course, led by our esteemed guest tonight, Mr. David Plouffe. Now, President Obama has singled out David for unique praise. He called him at David's farewell from the White House, he called him a numbers genius. And I spoke to David earlier and I said, is that what you've got on your business card? Do you have numbers genius on your business card, President Obama? He said, no, that's stupid. Why would I have that? That's a stupid thing to have on your business card. But now, the President also attributed his victory to David, saying that were it not for David, he probably wouldn't be in the White House. And since leaving government, David's become the Senior Vice President of Policy and Strategy with Uber. Now, David, it's fair to say that I think this career move made a few eyebrows raise around the world. It's not the kind of crossover that we're used to seeing in an old economy. But yet, there are so many parallels in the skill set that you've taken from your old career to your new one. And it's a move that perhaps tells us a lot about how the economy is really shifting. The grand concept of levelling out and flattening hierarchies, of connecting people, the obvious links to Uber's ambitions of fundamentally changing the way transport works in cities. The challenge faced by Uber in its evolution from a plucky startup to an established player, I think these are challenges that progressive organisations are very familiar with. It's a challenge that increasingly needs to be met not only by growing startups, but by modern political parties, unions and major companies. So ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to introduce someone who can discuss all these topics and more, Mr. David Plouffe.
Thank you, Sam, for that introduction. And I'm going to try and be relatively brief because I think Sam and I want to have a discussion, which generally is, I found, more interesting than folks prattling on at the front of a stage. But first of all, I may occasionally lose my train of thought because this is such a gorgeous building. And I may just stop to admire it from time to time. It's just spectacular. I want to thank the university for having me here tonight. Be a little difficult, easy in some places to blend Obama and Uber, but I'll start by first of all saying it's wonderful being in Australia during a week where your politics is so quiet and uneventful. And it reminded me I'm retired from politics and it's a lot more enjoyable to watch it than be in the middle of it during moments of challenge. You know, I think in terms of the Obama campaign, which it actually struck me that you know, that speech you referenced was over 10 years ago. So I first started my journey with Barack Obama when he was a state senator, which is a small elected office in our country, local, in the state of Illinois where Chicago is. And he was running for the United States Senate, which is a statewide office. We have 100 senators, 2 from each of our 50 states. And he was given really no chance to win by anybody. He started out at 3 or 4%. His name was Barack Hussein Obama, 3 years after 9/11, African-American from the south side of Chicago. And so there are some parallels to Uber, and I'll connect them in a minute. So what happened there was really a belief in him, in people, that he wouldn't raise more money than anybody. He had very little political support, very few organizations supporting him. But he believed that if he had a message that inspired people, they might be inspired to work on his behalf and spread his message. And that is something that usually in American politics is laughed at, because our politics has become largely about sound bites and how much money you raise and how clever your TV ad is. In fact, in that race for the US Senate, we didn't run our first ad until 3 weeks out. Our opponents have been on the air for weeks and weeks and months ahead of us. And that bet paid off. I mean, he built a coalition of the young and the progressive and the moderate Republican and Latino and Asian all across the state of Illinois, and ended up winning by 30 points. And it was that same approach that led us to our strategy for the 2008 presidential race. By the way, when I met Barack Obama in 2003 to start working on his US Senate race, my discussion with him was not about issues of war and peace or healthcare reform or how to create jobs. It was, you have to stop being your own driver. You actually have to try and raise money. You've got to show up to things on time, like very remedial things, okay? So if you had asked me then what chance was Barack Obama to be president, I would have said less than 0. When he started running for president, I would have said less than 5. He might have even given it less than that. So it was a very improbable journey. But again, it was rooted in the belief that the country was ready for something new and different, and that we clearly, in that race against Hillary Clinton, had very little institutional support, particularly in the beginning. We were not given much of a shot to win. The one thing we had was a great candidate who then married himself to millions of Americans, who funded our campaign and knocked on people's doors and registered voters. And for someone like me who had made a profession of politics, much to the chagrin of my family, it was the kind of campaign you always dreamed of being part of. Bobby Kennedy in 1968 had that sort of campaign. We had very few in American politics where the most important thing going on in every day wasn't the TV ad you were running or even the soundbite Barack Obama was delivering. It was the work of millions of people out in their country. And that's how we were able to win the primary against the longest of odds. Almost had to run a perfect campaign. We certainly did, but we came close. And then to win the general election. And that's really how Barack Obama was reelected 4 years later, in the teeth of a really tough economy, against an opponent whose background was in the economy, with a divided populace. The one campaign commitment I think we'd all agree who were part of the Obama campaign we weren't able to deliver on was changing Washington dysfunction. So we had a lot stacked up against us. And we were lucky to have an opponent who said a few ill-timed things. But what we had again was an amazing group of people, and it was different because in 2008 it was kind of giddy inspiration. In 2012 it was steady determination. And most people don't realize this, that in 2012 we had more volunteers than we did in 2008. They raised more money. They turned out more younger people. They turned out more Latino voters. And that is why so many people, including Mitt Romney, were surprised on election night. Not that Barack Obama was reelected, but he did it with some margin. And so it speaks to the power of people, and I think the power of people to really, when they set their eyes on change, they can deliver it. And I think we'll talk a lot more about Obama, I shouldn't say Obama, the president now, and politics, I'm sure, in our discussion. But, sort of how that relates to Uber, which is my latest journey. A lot of people were surprised when I joined Uber. And I did it because, first of all, like in the Obama campaign, I woke up every day surrounded by younger and smarter people than me. And that's a wonderful thing. It inspires you and you learn a lot, and it's very energizing. And that's the same thing with Uber. They've got people running, some of them are here tonight, who may stay with Uber their whole lives, but if they're not, they're going to run major Fortune 500 companies. They're just terrific talent. But I believe in the mission. I spent a lot of the last few years of my life working with the president and others to figure out how do we create better jobs. For a while, it was just how do we avoid a depression. Then as we began to dig out of the recession, it was how do we create better jobs. And it's not just about jobs anymore, it's how do people piece together enough of a good income so that they have stability and they can take care of their families and they can realize some of their dreams. And what I see in Uber is on the economic side, the best example out there in my view of something that provides people that opportunity. There's a deficit in trust today. I mean, everywhere really around the globe, as it relates to government officials, politicians, businesses, even academic institutions, faith institutions. We've never seen trust at a lower level. But what people trust is each other, right? They always have. So in the Obama campaign, the most important conversation happened any day It was not Barack Obama to Katie Couric. Now, maybe Sarah Palin to Katie Couric was important, but, me talking to a reporter. The most important conversation was two people talking over a fence or over a beer, or walking their kids to school. One was an Obama supporter, one wasn't sure, they were undecided. And that's the conversation that really mattered. And that's the conversation I think that matters with Uber, and that Uber is very unusual because they have passionate users. Most users of brands and products, they may like it, but it sort of ends there. And with Uber, you see people are very passionate, and so they want it to come to their city, grow in their city, and so they're willing to, come to events, and they're willing to sign petitions, and they're willing to use social media to both build the business and convince others to use it, but also to outreach to government to show that there's a lot of support. So it's really exciting for me to see the power of grassroots activism and passion on both the political side and the business side. I feel very fortunate, very spoiled in a way, because in most political campaigns, that just simply doesn't exist. Even after the Obama experience, most campaigns today are bloodless, and they are not focused on the grassroots, and they certainly don't put volunteers first. And most companies certainly don't have the asset that Uber has, which is a very passionate, growing, technology-savvy base. With that, I think we'll get on to the more interesting part of the night, which is some discussion and questions. So thanks, everybody.
So the first thing to say is that a lot of these questions were crowdsourced, so I won't embarrass people by singling out who asked them, but they came from people out here. Some others I've put in there, and some other ones your staff have put in there. I'll let you guess which ones they are. And why don't we start with one of those? Now you took on a big challenge to try to get a freshman senator from Illinois that, as you say, no one had ever heard from get elected. And it seems like you're taking on a bigger challenge now, trying to get Uber regulated around the world. Where do you begin?
Well, I think that in politics, there's a very powerful force called momentum. Generally, once you start going down, you keep going down. Once you start going up, usually don't go as fast up as down, but the trajectory matters.
I guess the obvious parallel there is you guys won Iowa. You came from nowhere, you won Iowa, you won the caucuses, but then you didn't win New Hampshire. Right. A couple of weeks later, or a week later.
Thanks for reminding me.
Well, what went wrong? What happened?
I will tell you to this day, when I go to New Hampshire, I feel like getting sick. So.
I'm sorry. This is a terrible question.
This is a funny story. It's been told publicly, or I would not say it. I don't know who told it publicly, actually, because there's only 4 of us, but I have a suspicion. So this was the Sunday before the 2012 election. We're in New Hampshire. So it was President Obama and President Clinton and myself and David Axelrod, who was mentioned earlier, my colleague and partner in crime. And we were in the presidential limousine. And we're on our way to the event, and Bill Clinton just leans back and says, "Man, I love New Hampshire." I mean, he had a point to why he was saying that. And I couldn't help myself. He is a former president, but I said, "That's great, Mr. President, but we like Iowa a little bit more." And so there's still a little rivalry there. But why do we lose New Hampshire? I mean, I think in politics, like business, I would even argue like relationships. I mean, if you keep doing what you're doing, you're going to get in trouble. You're going to fall into a rut. And so our whole strategy was predicated on winning Iowa. Most people thought it was a crazy strategy. Most people thought we were going to lose heading into the caucuses. We were close, but most polls had Hillary Clinton ahead, or John Edwards, of all people. So, I mean, that's where we were, like, geez, John Edwards could beat us. So we win, and, we were getting closer to New Hampshire. She still had a big lead, but then we went Iowa, and it was only 5 days after. But by the second day, we had taken the lead, and by the night before the caucuses, or the primary, we had taken a pretty big lead in our own research and everyone else's. And so 2 things happened. One, Hillary Clinton had a very emotional moment the day before the New Hampshire primary that carried the day heading into it, where she choked up about why she was doing this in a very powerful way. And, she had been at like 45 or 50, and then she kept dropping to my point about momentum, down to about 32 or 30. But all those people still liked her. It's not like they left her. They just said, I think I'm going to go with Obama. And then that reminded them, I really do like her, and she needs me. And so she bounced back. And then, not to get too in the weeds, but in New Hampshire, there are some states in the United States where you can only vote in a primary if you're a member of the party. In our country, that just means Democrat or Republican. But there are some states that allow anyone to vote. So if you're not registered with the party, you can vote. And in New Hampshire, that's the case. They often are decisive. And the two candidates that independents were supporting, by far, like 90% of the independents were supporting Obama or McCain. And Obama, the coverage leading into the New Hampshire primary was Barack Obama's on a roll, Hillary Clinton's doomed, he's going to win. And it was John McCain fighting for his life. So a lot of independents decided to say McCain needs to help more. And we ran a terrible campaign for 5 days. We basically were surfing on momentum and, you know, giving a lot of speeches. And New Hampshire is very much like you get in the, you work the streets, and we did some of that, but do town halls and take every question, and we just didn't close well. So for a variety of factors, you know, that led me and two colleagues to have to go knock on his door that night where he and the First Lady were, and she was always tougher in these circumstances than he was, to say, by the way, we're not going to win New Hampshire. And he was not pleased and wanted to know why that was. He always handled it with great calmness, but it was a big surprise. We were surprised. So that's the thing, actually, that I think any business is going to go through a rough patch, any political campaign, any government, and you just are. These days, as fast as the media moves, you're probably going to go through them a lot. They're going to happen more often. So how you recover is what matters. And we recovered well. Barack Obama that night, I think the whole eyes of the political world and maybe the world were on him and expected to see a dejected, deflated candidate. And he was ebullient and motivated. And as we campaigned in the days coming out of that, we were motivated. And what's fascinating is that was, I still remember the day, it was January 8th, 2008. January 9th was our best fundraising day of the campaign and the day that most people volunteered and were swarming our campaign offices. Because they basically said, okay, I got your back. And let me tell you, that made a huge difference. In fact, we're all like, you know what, no matter what else happens, we can't let these people down. And so there was a very strong relationship. And so I think that, you know, we were tested often during that campaign. I think probably most severely by losing New Hampshire. And then when the president's former pastor, Jeremiah Wright, reemerged, that was the other time that we were in sort of mortal threat.
Take us through that. How important was that, you know, the intervention of Jeremiah Wright and President Obama's ability to recover from that? I remember in your book you said it was one of the most important moments in the campaign, that speech on race that he gave in.
I think I'd rather go back to talking about Uber. It's very unpleasant memories. Well, first of all, big failure in the campaign. We knew Jeremiah Wright. We knew basically his sermons, but we had never watched all the videotapes. So ultimately there was a failure in the department of the campaign, but that's my failure. So we knew it was going to be an issue when it emerged more forcefully, but you know, now it's different now. Back then, cable TV was still the dominant way these things unfolded. Now it would be social media with a video in bed. But nonetheless, you know, Jeremiah Wright looped for days, saying, you know, pretty vile things. And so the president went out and did a series of national interviews about this. And he called me and David Axelrod that night. We did a joint call and said, guys, that's not going to cut it. I mean, I think I have to do something bigger here. I've got to try and put this in context. I've got to give a speech not just about Wright and me, but race in America. And it sounded crazy, but we didn't have any better idea. And so basically for 4 days, he still had the campaign, but he wrote the speech himself with just very little help. And so I think, again, like New Hampshire, people got to test his character and see it tested. I think in that speech, people, for the first time, probably saw a president. Whether they liked him or not, or were going to vote for him or not, he kind of rose to the occasion and gave a speech that I hope 50 years from now will be, you know, one of the seminal speeches Barack Obama gave and will be studied. But I think that, like in Australia, I'm getting the picture here as well, but certainly in America, a presidential campaign is a withering examination into the character of who these men and women are. There's no escaping the spotlight, and you are revealed for who you are, for good or for bad. Most people don't survive it, by the way. They don't come out the other end whole. And I think when Barack Obama, and that's why people ask me, who's going to be the next president? You know, this resume, this governor. I'm like, first of all, most of them won't survive.
That's a question to come.
Right. So I won't. So I think that they're able to see you tested, good moments, bad moments. And I think that doesn't mean that those exactly replicate what it is to be president, but it is important for the American people to see how you respond to crisis in different situations.
Well, let's ask that question. Who's going to be the next president after Barack Obama?
I don't know, but Uber is going to deliver a lot of people to their inauguration. I know that. Because Washington, D.C. is one of our best cities. I don't know. All I know is we'll be surprised 50 times between now and then. And I think there's demographic advantages that the Democratic Party has that are profound in terms of their support with young people, Latinos, African Americans. suburban women, that will collide against people's natural desire for a change in party after 8 years. So I think it's going to be a fascinating election.
Can't help but notice you didn't answer the question, but that's okay. Look, you used big data more than any other campaign had in the past. And it's become, I think, as a result of that campaign, a bit of a buzz term. Now Uber's a tech company as much as it is a driving company. How does it use big data, and how do you think it changes the way that we engage, or you engage, with your stakeholders?
Well, you know, we have, like in the Obama campaign in Uber, we have brilliant people who run the business and are very versatile with data and numbers. There's a big difference, by the way. So in the Obama campaign, we applied a model between 0 and 100 to every American voter. 0 meant definitely Romney or McCain and voting for them. 100 meant definitely Obama and voting. And that model became perfect over time. And it's how we made decisions about allocation of resources and how we thought we were doing and message adjustment. So we knew everything there was, we thought, I mean, within reason, about the American electorate. Uber has to be very careful from privacy standards. So we know a lot less about our riders and our drivers than we knew in the campaign by far. We have to be careful about that. I think data is something that we can know a lot more in the world now than we've ever known before. Consumer companies, politics, which means that takes some of the guesswork out of it, which is good. But fortunately, people like me wouldn't have any, or many of us wouldn't be employable. There's still an art to it. So how you use that data, how you project it, how you make decisions based off of it. Sometimes models are wrong, and sometimes you're just presented with situations that data can't help you with. When you're in a crisis or a moment of great challenge, you just kind of got to go with your best gut and instinct.
So Barack Obama's 2008 campaign, I saw there was a lot of commentary between the way it used social media to the way Kennedy used television. Take us through that sort of trend of where you see campaigning over the next, I don't know, 20, 30 years. Where is traditional media balanced to social media? Where's that going?
Well, I think right now, you'd say in 2015, 16, probably for the next few years, that Facebook is the front page of the world right now. So, I mean, here in Australia, I think 65, 70% of the people live in this country are on Facebook. One of the highest, penetrations in the world, but it's huge everywhere. So in 2008, Twitter didn't exist till the last few weeks of our campaign, by the way. Facebook was important, but it wasn't the all-consuming entity it is now. So by 2012, when we were trying to get messages out and reach people, Facebook was probably the key thing. And so I think that's true for consumer companies too. I mean, if you aren't thinking social first, and it's more than that, it's direct channels. So if you have the ability to communicate with people by email and text who are customers of yours or volunteers of yours, and you've also got the ability to communicate them through social and get things to go viral and get them to share it. There's a lot of people where, now in Australia, the news media is still highly relevant. There's still a decent amount of consumption. In the US, it's becoming less relevant by the day. So if you're not directly reaching people, now sometimes that can be with news content, but a lot of time it's with your original content, your own creative work that you share. So I think politics will increasingly, in the US, the media will become less and less important. TV ads will become less important. Still there, still reach particularly older voters, but it will be your social strategy with your direct channels. And you marry that with ground, because we measured the effectiveness of contact in the campaign almost to obsession. And by far the most effective contact in terms of actually recruiting someone to volunteer, getting the vote, or switch their vote to Obama was a human contact. Okay? I mean, the more time we all spend behind our smartphones, and some of us spend all of our time behind that, the more we value that human interaction even more. So part of it is, Facebook is an important part of that. It's how people get information, right? So if you want to know, if we want every Uber user to know why we're safe or what our insurance position is, social is probably the best way to do that. In the Obama campaign, the best way for people to know about his positions were they weren't going to watch him on the news. They weren't going to really download a huge position paper from a website, but if there was something easy and accessible on Facebook about our job plan for manufacturing or a plan for the environment, they'd absorb that. Hopefully they'd share it. But then when their friend says, you know, I'm not sure Obama has the right plan on manufacturing, well, our supporter could say, actually he does, and here's why, boom, boom, boom. And that sounds like very elemental. It's not. It's really hard to scale that. But when you get that and you've got an army of people out there on your behalf, making your pitch and also correcting misinformation, it's really powerful.
How transferable is it from Obama to whoever comes next, or to other House races or statewide races? He did a great job, and you did a great job in building that base of the Democratic Party. But one of the criticisms I've heard is that they're very personally attached to Barack Obama as a person and not necessarily to Governor so-and-so or the next nominee.
They are. I mean, they were attracted to him. And it was a very unusual coalition. It was a lot of people who were not partisan political activists and a lot of young people. And so it's an outstanding question. Whoever our next nominee is, and we may have one, I think she could be particularly strong, but I think she has the ability to capture people's imagination, but it's really hard to do. I mean, the most likely reason a young person decided to register and vote was because someone who was a friend or a colleague asked them to. Some of the most powerful stories is you'd see African Americans who were 65 or 70, never voted before, and they were going to the polls because their brother said, you know, let's do it for the first time. And so what we did in creating that coalition, technology played a big role in enabling it, but it wouldn't have gone anywhere without that real appeal, and it was less appeal. There was a strong connection between Barack Obama and this part of the electorate in America. So it's an outstanding question. I mean, we didn't have great elections as a party in 2010, 2014. There were a variety of reasons for that. In 2010, it just didn't matter. I mean, we had won all the seats we could win 2 years and 4 years previously, so we were going to give up a lot of territory, even in a good economy. But in a terrible economy, in a divisive Washington, it was a bloodbath. But I think what it speaks to is that recreating that coalition is really hard to do, and it is not transferable. He can ask people to get involved, and he does, and he will. But, you know, when you ask people to vote, and they're not sure they want to vote, or to give money, and it's really a sacrifice to do that, or volunteer and give time when that's hard, they really got to believe in it. They've got to believe in it. And that's what I think has never really been properly appreciated. Everyone talks about our technology and our strategy, and those both were terrific. But at the core, it was a bond. And so, and again, I think the bond in Uber now is very unique because the bond between consumer and company is quite tenuous. And so it's very unique to see something this strong where people are willing to take action. So I think the jury's out. I think a Democrat should win the White House in 2016, given our electoral college system and the demographic changes that propel us to strength there. But doing it's really hard. It takes a lot of money, a lot of focus, but before you even get to that, there's got to be people saying, you know what, I believe in this. I'm willing to put skin in the game, and that's a hard thing to do.
We've got time for only one or two more questions, I'm afraid. So look, this is just a chance for me to sort of give you a chance to give us any gossip or any internal campaign stories that you thought were particularly cool that you wanted to share with, you know, just you and me, right? We don't need to.
Well, as the president often says, he says, I'm going to write a book at some point, so I want all the good stories in that. I don't know. I mean, there's so many to think about. You know, some of the most fun, I'll never forget this story. So this was like just a glimpse of American politics. So this was 2012, actually, but we were back in Iowa, where we had all spent so much time, and we were doing a bus tour. And and we went to the Iowa State Fair, which is kind of the quintessential American event. You know, fattest pig and biggest butter cow and fried, you know, butter and Twinkies and chicken on sticks, right? And so the president went there for a while and went to a beer pavilion, and the crowd starts chanting, 4 more beers, right? It was a lot of fun. And so we're getting ready to go, and this was David Axelrod and myself and a few of my colleagues decided we want to stay. It was like, you know, working a campaign is just, it's such a privilege to be a part of it, but it's hard to describe how hard it is, particularly when I was in the White House too, so you had day job and campaign job. So we were like, this was like going to be 2 hours, and we said, we want to stay at the State Fair. The president's like, you're not coming with me? I'm like, no, we're staying here. He's like, we got stuff to go over. Like, listen, we just need a couple hours to like blow off steam. So he goes back to the hotel, and we decide to gallivant around the State Fair. And so it was funny because we're getting these fried turkey legs that are like this large, okay? And we all get them and we're eating them like, I don't know if you know the Flintstones cartoon, but it's like that. And we have a beer too, right? And then Axelrod's phone rings and he like drops it and he finally picks it up and he's like, hello. So he's like got the turkey leg here, the beer here. And he's like talking and he's like getting a little animated. And I'm just like, hang up, because I knew it wasn't the president. And I'm like, who was that? He's like, it was Barbara Streisand giving us message advice, right? So then we walked down the arcade to where they play games, and we play games. And I was fortunate enough, there's a game where you throw an American baseball and try and break beer bottles, and I did that. And so they gave me a dog, a big stuffed dog, and I handed it to a kid, and which was the right thing to do. And then I thought about it. I said, I should have kept that and put it on our bus, because Mitt Romney likes to drive dogs around on his roof. So that tells you. So anyway, that was a funny story. But I think, the campaign debate in 2012, the first debate where we had an epic failure, was probably, I think, that was probably the most, well, I wouldn't know if it's the most consequential. It's probably the thing that's most interesting to people. And, that was just, we saw it coming. And, every president since, well, Kennedy had the first televised debate. But every incumbent president, so in 1976, Gerald Ford had a terrible first debate with Jimmy Carter and really, really cemented Carter. 1980, Reagan has a transcendent first debate, and that sends him off to victory. 84, Reagan has a terrible first debate with Walter Mondale, and Walter Mondale, of all people, gets back in the race. 96, in 92, George Bush had a terrible debate with Bill Clinton where he looked at his watch and acted like he was bored. 96, Clinton never had a terrible debate, but that was his worst debate, the first one. And then George Bush in 2004, John Kerry, cleaned the floor with him and changed that race. So you knew that this could happen and had happened. And so it's not like we sailed into this. We said, incumbent presidents always struggle. Even if there was a soundless debate, just having your challenger on the same stage with the president elevates that person. Mitt Romney, we knew, had been practicing a lot, and when he had time to prepare, he was quite disciplined and effective. And we kept having terrible practices. And so you went into it basically just hoping, which you never want to do in politics. But he had always been a real game time performer. So we thought, I remember David and Axelrod talking like, we have no idea how he's going to pull this out, but maybe he will. I mean, we saw nothing in practice to suggest it. And he was worse that night, and he would admit this, than he had been in practice. It was terrible. And so, but what's interesting about that is I still love, in a world of big data, politics still has the capacity to surprise. And see, what happened was, and then Romney, Obama actually beat Romney more in the third debate than we lost the first debate, which is a pet peeve of mine. That got no attention. Why does that happen? Because these people are still human beings. They get up there, and the lights go on, and the world's looking at them, and you can practice all you want. And admittedly, we didn't have great practices. But even if we had, he could have had a terrible debate. I mean, that's why debates are usually not terribly important in most political races in America, but they're really important for the presidency. And that was a great lesson that, even in the practiced art of politics in America today, you put those two human beings on a stage and you don't know what's going to happen. And like losing the New Hampshire primary, the truth is the president recovered from that pretty well. I mean, he campaigned hard, and then we had a good second debate. But that was a trying period because in our country, Republicans are much steelier. When something bad happens, Democrats kind of, they get very, very panicked and nervous, and they kind of jump on you. So our party was like, after Sarah Palin was nominated, everybody thought we were going to lose for a while, which is hard to say now, but that's what they thought back then, for a few days. And then after that debate, it was, did we throw the presidency away? People like Andrew Sullivan, who I really admire, wrote that Obama's lost the White House. So it was challenging. We knew what we had to do. We had to recover. So that's interesting that, I just think that's an interesting insight into the fact that even with all the practice, particularly in a debate where you're like, okay, here's your 60-second answer if Romney says this or Romney says that, it's still really hard to do. And clearly Romney, did not do well. And I think part of it was the pressure got to him. He had won that first debate, really thought he needed to win the second debate. When the president came out strong and they had an exchange over Benghazi that really went sideways for Romney, I think from that point he was sort of checked out. So it's interesting. That's where it is a little bit different than business, where a CEO can give a major interview and a press conference, and it's really important, obviously. But you don't have quite those moments where the whole thing's riding on it.
I think that's about everything we've got time for tonight. So I'd like to say thank you incredibly on behalf of everyone here. I'd also like to thank the audience. If any of you haven't been to a McKell event before, this is what they're all like. We're having another one tomorrow with Gareth Evans and Bob Carr, and if any of you are interested, grab one of the staff standing around the door and we can give you details for that. But I'd like to thank you, David. I'd like to thank Uber for putting this whole thing together, and of course Sydney University for hosting us, and I'll conclude there. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everybody.